Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntire's Morning Update.
When it comes to Russia, I have such a difficult time analyzing Russia. And it's for a very simple reason. You know, over the weekend, there were multiple points when Russian President Vladimir Putin paid respects to fallen Russian soldiers or Soviet soldiers. There's some sort of grave or memorial on a land lease program. Back around, I think, World War II, there were some Russians training, using Alaska to train when we were allies in World War II. A training mission went wrong and perished on American soil. And so the Americans built a memorial and allowed Russians to bury their soldiers there. Vladimir Putin, during his trip to Alaska, he went and laid flowers and knelt and did the sign of the cross in front of each one of those graves. There's also a memorial to America and Russia's alliance in World War II. First thing that he did when he got here to Alaska is he went and paid his respects at that memorial. At least that's what we're being told. And it's hard for me to see those examples and not be somewhat inspired by Vladimir Putin. Hey, at least he's got some sort of priorities right. But then one part of my brain says, wait a minute, that's just, he's a former KGB operative, okay? He's just doing this for propaganda purpose. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably right. And then the other part of my brain thinks, wait a minute, is this other part of my brain just telling me that because I've been so propagandized by my own government that I can't help but think, hey, when some leader, thug though he may be, is showing some degree of humility and humanity, to just disregard that? You see what I'm saying here? It's so difficult for me to analyze Russia because there has been such a big propaganda war, I believe, from both the United States and Russia itself. Now, I do believe, I just think it's a fact, the Soviet Union was a miserable failure. A miserable failure. I alluded to this in passing, that I saw these stats over the weekend that over the last 40 years, the percentage of Russians, based on the best available polling that we have, the percentage of Russians who describe themselves as Christians has increased precipitously since the fall of the Soviet Union. Their god of communism failed them, so they're going back to the one true God, if you actually believe that information. So I want to believe the best about Russia. I think it's a fact the Soviet Union was an utter failure, and if you believe those facts and figures that I just laid out for you, it seems like the Russians believe it was a failure as well because they're going back to church. So what to do with Vladimir Putin? It is true he was a former KGB agent. It's also true that at times, whether it's for propaganda or that's what he truly believes and he's just trying to be accepted into the Western world, he's shown humility and humanity. That's why I have a difficult time analyzing Russia. I want to believe the best about people. I don't think Putin is the greatest guy ever. I just think there's far too many people who end up disappeared or with really bad injuries, just, as one does, drinking coffee and, got some sort of radioactive agent slipped into my drink this morning. Okay, not a great guy. But at the same time, I do believe two things can be true at the same time. And I think he's acting in what he believes is the best interest for the security long-term of his country. It's just hard because I don't know which way I'm being propagandized.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at @RealAMUpdate.
Latest clip from Jubilee, that's where different people of different worldviews, perspectives, backgrounds, right wing, left wing, come and debate each other. A couple of black young individuals debated one another on the issue of reparations. The conservative dude took on this very liberal woman. Listen to this. I thought it was a great clip.
You can give everyone here like a $50,000 check, especially people that are in the streets who are committing violent crimes consistently. A $50,000 check, it's not going to fix anything. It's not going to increase the median household income in the next 10 years by 10% or 20%. For example, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. We prevented Chinese people from getting citizenship and even entering the country. We discriminated against them and basically put them under apartheid, even here in the United States. Yet they have the highest median household income. How is that possible? How come they don't complain and feel entitled consistently to beg for reparations and beg for this when they are killing each other 90% of the time, which is the rate that black people kill each other, according to the FBI?
Oh, young Matt.
Yet white people are the oppressors.
I'm not sure where your education came from, but they lied to you.
Stats don't lie, though.
Statistics lie all the time. So let's start there, particularly when the statistics are coming from the sources that gain from the statistics being shown a different way. So if you're going to start your argument on stats don't lie, you've already lost the argument. They lie all the time. One, comparing Chinese people who are immigrants that made a choice to come to the United States and comparing the continued effort of Black people to ground themselves in a nation that continues to make impediments for them to show and live and exist in their true citizenship is a false equivalency.
I don't believe that happens at all. No one here is in.
Are you acting right now? Do you really believe this?
I'm telling the truth. There's no systemic racism that I've experienced here in America. What system is racist? I think the only racism we've actually seen recently, systemic racism that we've seen, is the application of systemic racism against white people. The University of Western Washington, for example, has been trying to segregate dormitories using Black-only dormitories because Black people feel safer amongst each other, but they're more likely to kill each other than white people are ever to kill them. That's just the truth. You have King Von rapping about killing other Black men. Why should I think that the white man is the oppressor when Black men are more likely to kill me?
Oh my God, this is scary. You need to think about me as your mama. Do not talk to me in that fashion. So let's check that now.
So that young man came to this debate with little facts and figures. Facts and figures. Examples for why he believes what he believes. And the debate tactic employed by that liberal woman was, and I quote, it's a Latin word, condescension. Condescension. That was all she had. Just condescension. That's all that she had. She was confronted with facts. She was confronted with examples, contemporary examples that blew up her narrative about reparations. And all she has is condescension. You cannot debate your way out of spiritual blindness. You just can't. That is a calcified heart that you just heard there. It's very sad. But racialism is a cancer. It's got to be cut out. And it is absolutely destroying, and has the capacity at least to destroy this country. So good on that young man for actually bringing the best facts and figures he could to that debate. And you also noticed something he employed there? He asked several questions. You can bring all the facts and figures you want to any debate you want. Ultimately, when you're dealing with a calcified heart, the best thing often is to just ask questions, because that has the best chance of actually pricking the assumptions of the person you're debating against. This unassuming young lady has divided the internet. This is some program, I think, on YouTube, where a group of young men and young ladies, single, sit together in a room. And the young men and young ladies kind of put themselves out there. The catch is, though, the room is divided by a curtain. So the groups of people can't see each other. The guys can't see the girls and vice versa. And basically, you're supposed to match based on what you sound like, what your interests are, things of that nature. It's a cool little dating game, I guess. Well, this young lady went viral after she got up, introduced herself, and what she's looking for in a partner. Listen to this, and keep in mind, the groups of young ladies and young men cannot see each other.
Okay, I'm Riley. I'm 24. I'm from Houston, Texas. And honestly, I'm down for any good adventure. I just got scuba dive certified, and I'm planning to go to Australia this summer, so I'm super excited about that. And then I just picked up skiing like 2 years ago, and I honestly love any themed party. Like, those are like my favorite things to go to, my favorite things to plan. And I'm looking for someone that wants to be my adventure buddy, and it's someone that I can trust in and is going to be there for me.
Aww. If any gentleman would like to get to know Riley more, please step forward.
So the young men were asked, hey, if you want to get to know Riley, please step up to the plate. And not a single young man does.
Anyone, come on.
Hey, Riley, we're going to have you sit down.
So Riley sits back down. Now, like I said, these young men and young women, they cannot see each other. But I'll just say this for parenthetical information. Riley's an objectively attractive young woman. And I think maybe the ability to see her might have encouraged some of these young men to step forward. But that's not the point of this program. Now, the reaction to this particular clip is divided mostly along the line of sex. Most women I've seen reacting to this are absolutely crushed for young Riley there, just having been rejected after putting herself out there. And there's been a lot of empathizing with Riley and a lot of sympathy for her. Now, along the other side, when it comes to the reaction from men who see this clip, their reaction is, no, totally, there's tons of red flags here. Tons of red flags. I totally understand why none of the young men, without the ability to see her, got up and it expressed interest in getting to know her better. Now, the reaction from the men also, I'll say, has been over the top, in some cases, kind of cruel. There needs to be a little bit more sympathy for Riley from the men, in kind of a pitiful type of way, in a way that's like, oh, you poor girl. You need to understand the way that men think and the way that this comes off to young men. And I agree with some of the criticisms, the whole travel buddy thing. If we're dating, I want this to be going somewhere. I want this to be going somewhere, like to marriage, maybe. And if your entire first opening pitch is, I just want a travel buddy, I'm going to Australia. Well, who's paying for the Australia trip? Probably not Riley. It's probably her parents. Are they going to pay for me to go on this? So now I've got to take time off of work and I got to go into debt. I mean, there's just red flags all from the young man's perspective. There's red flags all over the place here. Basically, poor Riley didn't really articulate what she brings to the table for a young man. She just articulated what she wants and what she wants the expectation to be from the young men. So I totally understand why men had the reaction they did to this clip. Understand why women had the reaction they did to this clip as well. Just basically feeling sorry for poor Riley. But I'll just say two things. Number one, I'll reiterate this. The reaction that I've seen from the men need to have a little bit more sympathy. And number two, what poor Riley needs is her daddy to come take her aside and say, sweetie, I love that you like to have adventures. That's really cool. I think that's really cool. And I think you're beautiful, blah, 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 blah. But here's how this comes off to young men. You can have all the adventures you want, but make sure you're letting them know what you bring to the table for them as well. So that is my take on the young woman, unassuming woman, that divided the internet late last week.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at @RealAMUpdate.
Noor Siddiqui is the founder of Orchid. That's a company that's, quote unquote, screens embryos for those using IVF services. So that's in vitro fertilization services, and looks for possible so-called genetic defects and disease. Siddiqui recently equated the idea of using IVF screening to providing the maximum amount of love to a child, meaning that if a parent chooses not to use IVF, they're subjecting their offspring to untold risks and not being loving. What is screening? Well, in the context of IVF, screening, as it just laid out there, is going through each of these embryos, human lives, and deciding that one's sick, that one's not quite right, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. That's what quote unquote screening is in the context of IVF. This is not just this Siddiqui, Noor Siddiqui. This is not just her company. Doesn't want IVF just to be available for those who, for whatever reason, through natural means can't have children. She wants this to be the norm for everyone, even if you are capable of conceiving and carrying a baby naturally. She was interviewed recently by the New York Times' Ross Douthat about what her company actually does, and whether or not, in this question that you're about to hear, whether or not she fears that we're getting rid of a very important part of not only human biology, but human purpose and meaning. Listen to this very well-worded, well-intentioned, and really emotional question from the New York Times' Ross Douthat.
You are excited about a world in which lots and lots more babies than is the case right now are born from laboratory fertilization. And I'm just curious if you think, allowing that this might be desirable in certain cases, if a world where this became the norm would be losing something that is very fundamental to human beings and human families and human relationships. And that's the relationship between sex and procreation, between you and your husband having sex, and the future generations that come into being. And I'm going to take the podcaster's privilege, and I apologize for this, but I'm going to read you a piece of a poem. It's by a poet named Galway Kinnell, and the poem is called After Making Love, We Hear Footsteps. And the idea is sort of contained in the title, that the husband and wife make love, and it wakes up their child, and the child comes and gets in bed with them. And Kinnell writes, in the half-darkness we look at each other and smile and touch arms across this little startlingly muscled body, this one whom habit of memory propels to the ground of his making. Sleeper only the mortal sounds can sing awake. This blessing love gives again into our arms. Sorry. Do you worry about removing or diminishing from human experience that aspect of being a husband and a wife in a relationship with a child?
What do you mean?
That is one of the most horrifying and chilling things I have ever heard. That's Ross Douthat. I believe he's a Catholic. He does a pretty good job for the New York Times as their token Catholic. He gets very emotional asking this question because it stirs up emotions in him, that there is more to life than just sex for fun, and there's more to this relationship than just test tube babies. Are you worried by making IVF ubiquitous that you're taking away something very intrinsic, very fundamental, very important to the human experience when it comes to a man and his wife? And you could hear him get choked up there. And Noor Siddiqui's response is, what do you mean? I saw this quote come across my feed the other day from the American writer Walker Percy. It was posted to her credit by somebody named Noelle Murring. Don't know who she is. But this quote has everything to do with this conversation. Quote, "You live in a deranged age, more deranged than usual, because despite great scientific and technological advances, man has not the faintest idea of who he is or what he is doing." Isn't that the truth? That cold response from that woman who wants to make IVF the norm instead of natural relations between man and wife, natural carrying of a pregnancy. She wants IVF to be the replacement for natural human functioning. And when confronted with the idea that there is some sort of higher or transcendent meaning in this life, in the relationship between a man and wife, she says, what do you mean? She has no idea. She's not even in the same galaxy as that type of thinking. I think this is something we're going to have to contend with, not only the IVF conversation, but people like that who are just living in a completely different universe where there is no idea that there's something more, that there's a higher purpose in living, that there's meaning in life at all. That's going to be something that we have to contend with. Certainly the IVF conversation is one that we're going to have in increasing frequency in the near future. And I've said this before, and I don't mean it to sound condescending, but there's no way for it not to sound condescending. I've said that many on the right, many in the church, most in the church actually, are not ready for the conversation when it comes to IVF. Well, I wanted to put that to the test this week for our poll of the week. I asked you, on in vitro fertilization, do you believe it is number one, in first place, immoral because it cheapens life? 67% of people selected that answer. In second place, I don't know, at 15.3%. I don't know whether or not IVF is moral or immoral. I just don't know. In third place, other, comment below. We'll get to those in a little bit. That's 10.2%. And 7.3% said IVF is moral, but I'd prefer people choose adoption. Let's begin with Sarah, who says, having worked in mammalian genetics and trained in a procedure with mice very similar to IVF, I can tell you that some embryos have nothing wrong with them. They just don't survive the process. There is much death involved. I love my friends and their IVF kids, but I'm sad for their siblings. Yeah, I think something that we need to remember to do every single time we have these sensitive conversations, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Sarah, is remembering that even if a kid comes about via IVF, they're still made in the image of God, and they are wonderful blessings to both their parents and everyone around them. That is absolutely true. That the child's value has nothing to do with how they were brought into the world. Kay Adkins says it's unethical. The prevalence of this procedure is another example of a me generation. I think that's true in a lot of circumstances, Kay Adkins. I think it's a little bit more complicated than painting that over the entire conversation. We may get into that a little bit. Randy says the process could be moral if done correctly. It's not being done morally for the most part. I think this might be getting into, I think IVF is absolutely immoral when it comes to so-called homosexual parents. There's no such thing as homosexual parents, but just two dudes who think that they're married and are purchasing a baby. That's just high-tech human trafficking. When it comes to heterosexual, like actual, God's design for marriage, but they're just not able to conceive and bear children naturally, I do believe it has a better possibility, although I'm not convinced of it totally myself, a better possibility of at least being a gray area morally. So, Randy, I think that might be what you're getting to. Laura says, as this is not the way God designed the start of life, the practice of IVF creates a number of moral concerns. Priva says, my cousin and her husband used IVF, her egg, his sperm, to create their wonderful son. What I don't know is how many, if any, little lives were not chosen. Today, I'm the director of a pregnancy help clinic, and if only more would choose adoption. The fight is fierce. Yeah, so that's the sticking point here, because I know that there are some couples who will only create a set amount of embryos, human lives, and they have every single intention of using every single one of those embryos, and it doesn't work all the time. But that's kind of a way of addressing that so that we're not doing the selective process of, well, that one we're screening for that disease and that disease, kill it. I know there are some Christian couples who will have every intention to use every embryo that they create. Sudden adult death season says, never thought I would see Demolition Man come to life. Seriously, yes, you play God, which is wrong, yet if husband and wife can't have kids and want them, this is an option. Liberty Rejects says, this has long been my position. Separating conception from human function is playing God and clearly sinful. Country Squire says, as it is being done now, no. But if you fertilize one egg and implant in the mother, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I can still see that. There's also the problem of trying to play God. I think that would be the reaction to that. But I can see what you're getting at there, as long as you're just doing it one at a time. The problem is, just doing it one at a time is very unlikely of succeeding. Dylan says, it cannot be possible that the reason God may have made a certain couple infertile is so that they could go and petri dish a bunch of kids in a lab. As long as one child goes unadopted, IVF should not be permitted. That's kind of where I'm at, Dylan. That's pretty much where I'm at. And it's hard because it's sensitive. And it's not a bad desire. In fact, it is a healthy desire for married couples, a man and a woman, to want to have children. That's a God-given desire, actually. But when there are kids to be adopted, and if you tried this way and that way, and had different procedures done, or what have you, it's very sensitive. But I think there's more going on there than just the desire for children. Jay Breezy says, it's creating life to destroy it for humans' gratification. That's one way of putting it from a certain perspective. Valeria says, it's moral, no issues at all. That's interesting. Shulva says, some 20 to 30 children are created and discarded for every live birth. How can it be anything other than barbaric? See, that's proponents of IVF, like hardcore proponents, not ones who recognize at the very least the gray area that this is morally from a Christian perspective. That's the part that they don't want to talk about, because those are facts. I've heard different figures 2030 is maybe on the high end from what I've seen. But it is true that more often than not, you're quote unquote going through embryos or killing babies just to have one success. Gary says, if it was done where you get 2 embryos at a time, not as many as you can approach as the U.S. takes, it's fine into my eyes. It's when you have to get upwards of 8 viable embryos and only use 2. What happens to the rest? That's what I see as immoral. Just went to a cattle embryo school. Mind Your Business says, IVF and surrogacy is the commoditization of the womb. They will bring us to the Handmaid's Tale way before anything Trump does. That's the irony, isn't it? And James says, IVF separates procreation from God's design for marriage. Children are a gift, not a lab project. Life begins at conception, so freezing or discarding embryos is the shedding of an innocent blood. Adoption reflects the gospel. A lot of thoughtful and interesting answers. I think, at least in this audience, and that's not a surprise to me, I think you're all pretty smart. I think we're ready for the IVF conversation, maybe more than what I thought. Maybe I'm jumping the gun just a little bit by saying that the broader church or the broader Christian community in this country is not ready for this conversation. Maybe that's still true. It's probably more likely that this audience has just thought about this stuff a little bit harder than the average bear.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.